Welcome to the NWA-ETC Project ECHO. I'm Kent Unruh, and I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Brian Wood, our medical director, to introduce our guest.
Well, I'd like to welcome Jennifer Magnani back to give another talk for ECHO. Jennifer is part of our expert panel here at NWA-ETC ECHO and also is a social worker here in our HIV clinic at Harborview. And I will turn it over to Jennifer.
So we're talking about behavioral care plans, and these apply to patients who you already know. So we've all had this client, right? The one that stood over you and screamed obscenities at you because you wouldn't renew his narcotic prescription. The lady who pushed over your nice brochure display and almost hit another client as she was leaving. And the guy who brought up a shopping cart full of stuff and decided to make your lobby one of his day rest centers. So these are clients that we all find challenging, and they're clients that we see a lot here in Madison Clinic. So you'll see that in this slide deck that there's a lot of information packed into these slides. I'm not going to be covering all of the information here, but I did want it available for reference because I do think that it's possible to execute a behavioral care plan setting in most clinical settings. And so I wanted you to have it for reference materials. Please note too that you can contact me and I'm happy to kind of talk through the logistics of how to make this work. So when we're talking about a behavioral care plan, what are we talking about? Well, most of us are pretty familiar with a routine care plan. This is usually something that the client participates in, and what that one is designed to do is maximize health goals. So it has to do with making sure the client is meeting their goals in terms of measuring blood sugar or that they're keeping all their follow-up appointments. I've seen some providers write these down with clients and the client takes it with them and checks off things that they're supposed to be doing. But that's really not what we're talking about when we're looking at a behavioral care plan. So the primary difference really is that the behavioral care plan is designed by staff really solely. The client doesn't have the ability to impact any of the elements that are contained in the care plan. The client may be expected to follow elements of the care plan and ideally is being informed of what the requirements are and the expectations. By doing all that, though, the client ultimately is getting optimal care, ideally in a more seamless way. So what are the goals here? It's really to keep staff and visitors safe. We really want the clients to move through the clinic in as fast a way as possible that optimizes care. I do like for clients to participate in them in the sense that they understand them and understand what the expectations are when that's possible, but it's not a requirement. There are some clients for whom understanding the elements of a care plan they're just not cognitively able to do that, and that's fine. For those clients, they check in at the front desk, they get immediately escorted back to their room, and they just think that this clinic is fantastic. I'm fine with that. As long as nothing got stolen or disrupted in the clinic, then all is well. You should review these care plans on whatever fixed schedule you decide on internally, but there's no requirement for these. These are all done internally. And it's just good for everyone to kind of sit down and make sure that the issues are still at hand, because people do change. They do sober up, they address their mental health issues, and sometimes the care plans are not needed anymore. So why do we need them? I think that most of us know the elements here of why healthcare settings are stressful, but if you work in healthcare settings all day long, you might not realize just how stressful they can be. You've got clients that maybe have had poor experiences before. They don't really know they're afraid that they're going to hear a lot of jargon. They're afraid they're getting bad news. Sometimes they really are getting bad news. They could just feel like it's an expensive proposition and anxious in general. They can feel quite powerless, and also they can be in pain. I think we've all been in pain. We all know it's really hard to cope with stuff when you have this kind of nagging sense of pain in the background of things, and so you overlay any of the other stresses of being in a medical appointment, and it can be off to the races in terms of behavior. The other thing to know is that I think it would be awesome if all of our clients showed up and they were completely sober, but the reality is if you exist in the world in a state of intoxication, it's pretty unrealistic to expect that client to show up to your clinic in a sober state, and in fact can be dangerous. For example, if you're dealing with somebody who's coming off of alcohol, they could go into DTs then in your lobby. So it doesn't help in terms of their ability to keep their impulses in control, but it's just kind of a reality of the people that we care for. So what do we use care plans for? I like to categorize two different kinds of behavioral care plans. One are for people that are on the spectrum of heading towards violence. This can be verbal violence. Really, the client stops at just really loud, aggressive verbal behavior. But this can run the gamut all the way up to, hey, we've seen weapons from this client in the clinic, and all of that is kind of on the spectrum of violence. And so there's a type of care plan definitely for those types of clients. The other type of client that really benefits from these are what we call the special handling clients. And these clients really have nothing along the violence spectrum, but they do need some extra accommodations in the clinic process in order to make the treatment go well. And so these are the people that are using your weight room as a day rest center. They're people that are so mentally ill that being in a crowded environment really just triggers them, and then they start screaming. Well, that's not anyone's fault. The patient can't control it even if they're highly medicated, and so the clinic itself needs to change and really change the wait time to get them out of the lobby as fast as possible. So you might think, oh gosh, it's Madison Clinic, it's Harborview. For those who work in this state or are familiar with what we do here, you might think that all of our patients have a behavioral care plan. Not so. There's really only 90 out of 2,500 clients that we serve. And only twice have we said to a client, you really can't come back. We really pride ourselves on being able to serve clients who show the worst of all behaviors. And we take that very seriously. If we cannot figure out a way to work with you, we know that there is really no other place that will see you. And what makes these care plans work in large part is the total buy-in that we get from the physician staff, our front desk staff, pharmacy staff, nursing. Everyone participates in these. Everyone's responsible for an element of their execution. We've got 3 different levels of care plans here at Madison Clinic. The first is really for the special handling patient. These are things to know to optimize care, but no one should be in any danger from those clients. Star plan patients could create some amount of danger. They haven't quite yet, but they're sort of along a path of that. And then there's the YIPES patients, and those patients really, they've actively been violent in clinic, or we've seen them carrying weapons. YIPES clients for us are probably only about 10 of the 90 that we have current care plans on, and the others are divided equally between care and star. So how do you build one of these? Let's say your clinic wants to embark on this and you want to figure out a way to manage these clients better. What I want to say right from the outset, though, is that this isn't a miracle. Your clients are still going to be crabby. They're still going to demonstrate some behaviors that you don't want to see. But the goal of designing these is to really make this an institutional process and a team effort to address these behaviors. We've seen studies that show that that behaviors really can improve, but with using these types of care plans, that you can reduce overuse of care systems inappropriately. And definitely, it's not my intent to ever suggest that you should be the verbal toilet for someone's verbal outburst, or that you should put up with behavior that's in any way threatening to you. These care plans are designed to address those behaviors, and it's time for the client to leave for that day, but still develop continue whatever warm rapport you can with that client to say, yeah, but you can still come back tomorrow. You're not barred. You just need to leave today because we just can't put up with what you're doing. So when you design these, you want to keep them pretty simple. If the plans get really big, then it's hard for people to read through them. You want to be able to take a quick glance and know what's going on and what needs to be done. And so here's a sort of a template model that you can use if you're looking to write these types of care plans. I've got a list of key components that we won't go over super in depth, but you ideally want to get everyone involved. You definitely want to make sure that they're ethical and that they really keep safety at the forefront of what you're trying to do. Some things that you don't want to do. I think it's really easy to get irritated at these clients and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to teach you, for your check-in process, we're going to make it, 10 times worse than the ordinary client. It's tempting, but it's really not the purpose of the care plan. You don't want to aggravate the client more. These are clients with discontrol issues that aren't easily fixed, and so you just want to be careful that everyone's clear on the reason to do it. I'm also cautious about hearsay. I get reports all the time from facilities who send us clients saying, hey, this person is really dangerous, or they they've done X and Y here. Well, I like to lay eyes on the patient before I really design the plan. I definitely take that feedback into account, but I don't want to come out the gate, really aggressive with this client. I want to see if, what can we do to bend our systems to figure out how to make it work so that we don't get to that point that happened at the last clinic. I think we also all look at hey, I would never ignore cultural diversity issues when designing a care plan. But, some of the pitfalls here are more around clients will get agitated if they're handed a bunch of documents that they can't read, and so if English is your second language, that can happen. There's also some rules in some cultures about who should be spoken to about a terminal diagnosis or difficult news. In some cultures, really, it's the eldest son, for example, that really gets that news, not the client themselves, and so you'll see, a visitor kind of pop off at you, and it's really just because, there was kind of a misunderstanding about, culturally how things should have been handled. So you definitely don't want to expect too much from a client who's mentally ill or intoxicated. We talked about that some. Expecting clients to show up in your clinic sober is probably unrealistic. And when you need a care plan for someone that's showing up drunk or high, clearly that's not for the folks that can sit there quietly and be drunk and high. These are the clients that really sort of get in other people's business, or they're acting inappropriately. And we talked about kind of keeping these succinct and not overusing them. That's a big pitfall. It's easy to think of things that all these clients need to make the experience better, but really you want to use these judiciously. So let's look at a couple of examples. So this is a special handling patient. So Bruce is a middle-aged male. He's got a history of mental health issues and a long history of legal issues, including assault, drug charges, and armed robbery. So, he's had some history. He's not really had any history at Harborview. It's been 10 years really since he caused any trouble for us. He can be loud, he can be kind of disruptive when he feels like his needs aren't being met, but at this point, he doesn't seem to be on the line of committing another assault. He tends just to leave. And he's coming in a lot. He's coming in for weekly wound care. And if he's disrupting the clinic every time he comes in, that can be a real big problem. So what do you do? I think the highest point on this one is probably the second one. For this client, what we decided is that he really enjoys an audience. And that's really important to know, because if you're giving him bad news, you definitely want to do that back in the exam room. And I think it's social workers that are largely kind of trying to find space and don't always have like an enclosed area, right? So if I'm a social worker and I have a choice to meet with somebody in a public area out in the lobby just to check in and say hello, or I can take someone back to a private area, with this kind of client, I really want him in the back anytime I'm meeting with them. And if he tries to engage me when he sees me in a public area, I'm going to redirect him and try and get him in the back to finish up our conversation. Doesn't work for everyone, right? There are some clients that really you don't want to be in a private space with them because they're too dangerous, but not with this particular client. And then there's some reminders here about giving options for care. I think everyone has an option in terms of the care. Even if the other option results in death, it's still an option. And so just to clearly outline options can sometimes help clients that are feeling particularly out of control. So here's another client, Stephen. He's a male in his 20s. He's got paranoid schizophrenia. It's well known to the clinic, but he's really not had a reason for a care plan before. So Stephen has some impulse control issues. He's pretty well medicated, but he just doesn't have a sense of like right and wrong behavior necessarily. So for him, like if there's an open computer, why not surf for porn? And that's clearly not okay, but it can help just from a systemic response to know, hey, where is Stephen right now? Is he alone with a computer? Because we don't want him showing that in public areas. We don't want him feeling like that's okay. And so what to do here? So the front desk staff need to keep an eye on him when he's in the lobby, because we actually do have computers that's not for client use, they're for staff use, but we certainly have seen clients sneak in there and try and use the computers, and he's the one that you want to keep an eye on for that type of behavior. And he actually got banned from other areas of the hospital that were open for patient use, and so he needs to be redirected to his local library if he's going to try and use computers for free, but definitely not at the hospital. So let's say you've got someone with some risk of violence. Debbie, she's been a client here for a number of years. She's got drug addiction issues. She can present pretty erratically. And she's someone who threw a book, a pretty heavy book, into our lobby and almost struck a patient. No one was injured, thankfully, but we decided, hey, it's time to come up with a STAR plan. She's got the potential for some violence. She she could have easily hit someone with that book. She's also inappropriately kind of wandering back into clinic treatment areas. That's a big no. I'm sure it's a big no in your area too. So we don't want her really in the lobby, right? Her care plan is, let's get her out of the lobby. As soon as she checks in, let's try and room her. If she is going to need to be, if she's going to wait, then we want to provide really clear instructions. Is it 10 minutes or 15 minutes? Give her the choice to leave, right? If she feels like she can't control her behavior, then she should be able to opt to leave and reschedule without any penalty. And of course, a reminder not to go in the back of the clinic unless she's escorted. So what about the high risk of violence clients? I don't know how many of you serve these type of clients. Some of you, I know you're the sole provider out in your area, and so you may be seeing some of these clients too. And some of you might say, you know what, we're never going to serve a client like this, right? But we do get these. So we'll talk about Ralph, a middle-aged male, recently released from prison for assault. He was known to us before he went to prison, but he's back now. He had a history of stealing from the lobby, but nothing really violent. But at one particular time, he met with his social worker, said, you know what, I've got a gun on myself. I'm going to go ahead and kill myself here in the lobby. Well, that's a big problem. we did a full security lockdown of our lobby, searched him, and no gun was found. But you can't really do that, right? So a YIPES plan was developed. And so now for us, he has to go down and be searched by security every time he comes in, and everyone follows this care plan. No one talks to this guy unless he can produce a dated card from security that says that he's been cleared for that day, saying that he's cleared to come up to the floor. And it's just reminders about, you know, the types of behaviors you can see with him and when to call security back. So he's been searched for weapons. We know he doesn't have any of those, but it's not that he can't be quite erratic. So, you know, don't hesitate to call security. And he can be arrested for that. And we were very clear with him, I think, about going over the different elements of this care plan, you know, just to make sure that he understood what the repercussions of his behavior, you know, is. So